conversation about an artist's life. And I'm gonna kind of just make you think about what it means for your students to adopt an artist's life. I'm facilitating. I'm Naima. I know a lot of you, and then some of you I kind of recognize, and some of you I know not know. And some of you are a little bit new, and I like that. So I'm gonna facilitate. I'm here like as a guide, as a volleyball, as like a soundboard. It's probably my best take. And then?
My name is Erick Betancourt. I'm an actor, New York City based, born and raised in the Bronx, and happy to be here.
And then we do have our guest speaker. I'm gonna let her introduce herself because she's really our study. But I wanna get you started first in just sort of a bit of like a think bubble. You teach students all day long, and you teach them not just any subject, you teach them a specialty that like really helps invest a point of view about who they are. Oh yay! So we all find ways of starting from ourselves. And in starting from ourselves, I know like when I started teaching, I was like, I'm gonna make everybody conservatory trained. Like, they're gonna be a conservatory! I felt very passionate about that. I felt very like intense about that in the beginning. Because I was conservatory trained. But for me to even, my reason to teach is because I walked into my master's class, my first year, and I walked into an acting classroom, and the acting teacher was Black. Sounds like it shouldn't be a big deal, but for me, I was like this. I stared at her for 10 minutes like she was an alien, because I didn't really understand what she was doing there, who she was, why that would be, wait, how are you my teacher at this moment, right? And immediately she had a different type of way of talking to me, connecting with me, pushing me. I would cry and it would be like, ah, and she was like, yeah, you can speak through the tears. And now I say that to my kids and then it makes me happy. And I don't know, I was doing a lot of really good things with a lot of good people that had their hearts in the right place and did a lot for me as a kid to adulthood. But I don't think I would have been able to do a calling if I didn't have Barbara, right? And for someone in your classroom, you are that person. What I think gives me even more like big ideas, me coming in saying, I want them to be conservatory trained.
That's the sound that happens every time she says that.
I think what made me want them to be conservatory trained is because why shouldn't that person in Red Hook or in Sunset Park or Bushwick be on stage? I could not compute it. I did not understand. I think fast forward and a lot of time and a lot of red tape and a lot of politics, which is one of my weaknesses, and listening and experience, I started to understand that I am an investor in someone's social bank. That's always been my thing. And so how someone is an artist isn't as flat as they are on a stage on Broadway. And so that forced me to like look at myself too and think about everything that I know that I can do, what I don't know that I can do, and how am I bringing it to people. So I'm like, oh yeah, you're an agent. You just don't know that yet. Find this person. and started like pushing out people to say your acting skills come in so many different ways. Or some of my favorite ones is, I want to be a veterinarian. I'm like, that's great. You're gonna play a lot of doctors with me. They do, and we do. And I'm like this, and now you're gonna use this when you were telling somebody about their cat. So like, I guess my question, and I'm gonna give you one moment to think about it, and then I'm gonna ask you after that one like moment or two to get up, and you're gonna see some people put their own contributions on chart paper. I have more, but I would like you to keep adding to this. How do you imagine inspiring your students' artistic life? Again, how do you imagine inspiring your students' artistic life? Just take a moment. Okay. I'm going to ask you all to get up. And even if you're in the middle of the thought process, it might start a conversation, but I'm just going to say start writing any ideas, any connections, anything you got. You can take markers if you need some.
Finding your niche, that's a good one.
We have a concert that's just going forever. Yeah, June 21st. Literally the end.
But it's his story and then wrap it with like taking quotes and all this stuff. But he had a good life. He was sharing that. He had family support and good education. So when I worked for him, so we talked, and I was like, look, if I wrote something down the line, I could write something. And I then took your brother, and well, he has his publicist.
Oh, okay.
He has his own team. And I was like, I told him no, I enjoyed that. Good to see you. Great call.
So, just even like taking in some of the writing in the room. I mean, the word that stands out to me is awareness. It was different in the first session. I'm seeing a lot more about awareness and imagination. Yeah, awareness. I like that. So, and exposure. Exposure, awareness, and imagination. Those are the three that I get. So even to just think about those maybe as our three anchor words or three like big idea topics that we volley back and forth about, I just want to like give you a little bit of permission. As you hear like stories and commentary, please feel free to ask questions. This is like a time to like ask someone very like or two people with very interesting stories, very interesting ways into being on stage. I also want you to think about the students in your classroom or the students that will no longer be in your classroom because you're getting a whole new grade. Yay, you made it to June. But that means September's coming. So I want you to think about like the students that you probably have and then the students that you may have and how you can keep awareness of them, their imaginations in play, and just a sense of not only desire, I saw it, imagination, awareness, what's the third word? Someone give it to me. Exposure! High five, 1,000 points. The exposure, because I think I've worked in Title I schools, I've worked in a specialized high school, and I found the irony is the more specialized, which means like the more, I guess in some regards, rigorous, going for that conservatory training, I was getting less and less exposure to what makes it happen, or less exposure to the products or the art out there that gets funded and gets supported. And there's only but so much time in a day. So just reflecting on like how my classroom is or how I like running my classroom, because I do think exposure was one of like my major tenements. I brought everybody inside. Everybody was in my classroom. I think everybody has something to give. So with that, I would like you to introduce yourself.
I'm Daphne Rubin-Vega. I'm an actor, singer, dancer, performer, producer, writer, artist. I'm an artist.
Thank you. And so I think between Daphne and Erick, they have very interesting ends towards getting like art education, very interesting ends on being an artist, very interesting ends on cultivating art. So I just want to like start with like a little bit of how was going to school for you and art, possibly? Like what was that like?
It was, I went to school at a time when I was one of the only people that looked like me, like in any environment. And when I started to really begin to discipline myself in the arts and acting specifically, you know, I have like a, you know, I went to music and art high school. I wanted to be an artist, a painter. I remember my best friend at the time I must have been like 14 or 15, like we used to sing together. Her mother was a singer, and one time, you know, we were singing like rock and roll, and she said, Daphne, don't sing. And it's just like something that, you know, friends do, but I remembered it, and I didn't sing for years, until somebody said, you know, bitch, sing. Like you can sing, right? And it's what comes out of, you know, like they did not have shame or reticence about it. What I learned in school was to not trust my instincts, was to listen to others, to shut up and listen and learn and do what acting, you know, my acting teachers instructed. To not go to conservatory was lame. It means that I was not taking it seriously. And my reason for not going to conservatory and devoting 2 years and then 4 to working on my craft and not exploring it in any other way, right? Don't be doing your stuff because you're not ready. I couldn't do that because I had to pay bills. So, you know, I did things like toy fair, you know, and, you know, just like, hola, ¿cómo está? You know, and that was considered like acting in a way, like that was going outside of the conservatory thing. So I quickly and easily identified myself as like a radical in terms of, I'm not going to school to learn this. I watch it on TV, I watch it in theater. I learn as much from seeing someone act really badly. I discern myself. The world writ large is my teacher. This is my teacher. And every experience in my life has built me and built this specific instrument to do specifically what it does. And so this is a unique instrument. It's really not what I learned. I was too short. My father, before he died, like said, and it really took him a lot. Like he really just, he was so verklempt. He's like, you know, when you were in 9th grade, you went to this ballet school, and your teacher told us once, and I never said it, he never said it, that you had no neck. And you were never gonna be a dancer. And not only did I have no neck, I mean, I had like, I'm a short, you know, I was a little brown girl that was like round brown girl. And so the no neck part is interesting to me, you know, and just looking here, it's like, ain't nobody looking like, you know, Ryan Gosling, you know? And you know, I love Ryan Gosling and stuff, but like we are the ones who changed that paradigm. Or Ryan Gosling is doing like, he's playing Ken, you know? Like, and that's good. And I think that the world and commerce, making money, are really in a conundrum, because we're doing these remakes of things, and like remaking and reviving, and you know, that's okay, it's always nice, but like, it's like, we got better, much more interesting, truthful, impactful stories to tell. And impactful. And we're the ones who are telling it. Like, they look like us, you. And that's very scary to the industry, and it's very scary to, you know, those in power. And of all the words here, like one thing, humanity, you know, humanity is more important now than ever. If somebody, you know, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said now? Does it need to be said by me, right? And sometimes it's not that, it's like, no. And it's really interesting that in times of real political challenges, that are in our face. You know, who is telling the story? Who's telling stories? You know, that's, yeah, and who's censoring? Like, am I self-censoring or are you censoring me? I have no control over you censoring me. But when I self-censor, like, that's, right? Like, I will get hated on. Not might, I will get hated on if I speak truth to power. And am I gonna do it anyway? You know, I have a family. I have self-interests. I'm insecure, you know, sometimes. But like, all those things come into play and are extremely important if you're gonna call yourself an artist, right? Like, that's your job, is to do that thing, you know? And there's nobody more perfect to do it, right? Like, this isn't George Clooney's job. Anyway. And I used to say to myself when I was very, very young, when I didn't have other people telling me what I'm telling you, like, every day I do at least one thing to remind myself I'm a motherfucking artist. And it was a chant and a mantra, and like, I didn't know, I was rudderless. I'm still rudderless. Because you can't have a long game. We think we have a long game, and what do you want to do in 5 years? And it's like, yeah, good luck with that. Like, the world is changing so quickly, good luck with that. So if you want to tell the truth, that you can hold on to. And every day, you know, to like honor ourselves as storytellers and honor our perspectives and be willing to be humble when like scientists who don't do research to prove that they're right, but do research to fail beautifully, you know? I mean, like, failing is such a horribly limiting and traumatizing word, and then I'll shut up, but like, as artists who do this specific thing, I think we don't talk about the elephant in the room, which is, you know, cultural trauma. We come from, you know, millennia, like, you know, who was it? I think it was Resma Menachem, or maybe Ibram Kendi, who's like hated on these days. But like that, like, you know, before there was enslavement and the importation of bodies, there was the Catholic Church, you know, and there was like royalty, and there was like the Inquisition, and like people like, you know, like battle axing, you know, there was indentured, like, we come from so much. Who gets to tell the story? Right? And we forget that Shakespeare wrote for the people. He wrote for the people. Shakespeare to me is like Banksy. Like, there was no one Shakespeare, because like, one motherfucker is not gonna write all that stuff. I'm sorry, like, let's get real. And Alexander Pope, knowledge is power. And I think that the revival, like, and we've got the power. You know, it's like nobody wants to know your story. That's not true, right? Like, yeah.
It may be interesting to bring back to your classrooms, like, how do people imagine their story? How do they imagine their lives, their experiences being expressed out in the words?
Yeah.
You know?
If you didn't have any limitations, if there were no rules, if there was no wrong way to do that, how would you do that? You know, if you didn't have to hit the note like that, or place it a certain way, or, you know, how would you, you know,
perform it or do it?
Yeah, move your body. It isn't like, and enjoy the body that you're in. Or hate on it because you don't like it, you know.
I didn't start enjoying my body until Philip Seymour Hoffman and James Gandolfini.
Yeah.
When these guys came around, it was cool to be big and sexy and stuff.
Yes!
So,
Yes!
You know, that was the image that I grew up with. Before that, you know, the Tom Cruise and the Brad Pitts and all that, it was just like...
You mean the short guys?
Yeah, the Dustin Hoffman era and all that, Al Pacino.
Apple box, man.
I grew up in the Bronx. Exactly.
Hey man, I'm an
I
apple
hear
box.
those stories. I hear that they have to stand up on boxes.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Bronx. I dropped out of high school. I went to IS 116, junior high school. I went to Stevenson High School. I grew up in the Soundview area of the Bronx. Puerto Rican and Dominican. I dropped out of high school. I say that because then I ended up going to prison. And so I served 2 years in prison for dealing drugs. I had a long run of dealing drugs. My father was a heroin addict who spent a lot of time selling drugs and then later on using drugs and asking for drugs and change on 125th Street in Harlem. My mother was a cocaine user, and then also we have 4 siblings, different fathers. So I just took to that. You know, there was gang life, street life, and all that. And so I committed to committing to what I thought was the right thing to do, was make money, get the hell out of the projects, and go, you know, start a business, live a life, or you know, eventually be successful. That was the dream, at least the goal. I ended up in prison. In prison, it was kind of like the stop for me. I was 22 years old, and that's when I realized that I needed to do something else. I got my GED there. I was able to, a teacher told me, well, if you sold drugs on the street and you were running around in Washington, D.C. and in Boston and Florida and all these areas, and from the Bronx, you were just a kid from the Bronx, then you could get a GED and stuff. And so I committed my ass off and worked on getting the GED. It was like, yeah, you know, possibly. And so I worked hard at getting that. And then eventually took my first college course in prison, which was like Intro to Business. That was the first class I took and the only class I took there at that time. When I came home from prison, I was still on the path. I had learned how to weld. I learned how to cut hair. I had taken anger management, AA, all these programs, so my package looked really nice and I could be able to get out on parole and potentially start my life. And when I went to job skill programs and looking to get a job, all of them said no. So they said, no, sorry, you know, we're not going to give you the $16 an hour at the time or the $18 an hour at the time for welding and this and that. We're gonna pass that on to someone else. So then I got really frustrated and I decided, because I was on parole at that time, I was really frustrated, and so my parole officer said that I had to do something else. So I signed up for community college. And so I was 23 years old in community college and trying to figure out what I was going to do. Sorry, 24 years old at the time, at community college, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And in there I took Introduction to Acting. And Introduction to Acting was great. It introduced me to a world of theater, but more importantly, I met people in the community who were putting up a play, and I submitted and asked, hey, can I audition? I don't have no theater experience. Can I get a job? Can I work with you guys? I want to learn. And so they gave me the opportunity to put up this play, and that became my community. When I started talking about the possibilities of going to undergrad and taking acting serious, the way that you're supposed to do it, supposedly with conservatory, right? I was like, all right, well, help me and show me how to do it. And so I applied to undergrad. I picked one that didn't have to audition for, and that's the one I got accepted into. I did that for 3.5 years or 3 years, I think it was in total. And then I applied to grad school, and then did 4 years of grad school. Oh, sorry, 3 years of grad school, another 3 years of grad school. So in total, it was about, I would say it's about 10 years of education that I spent from when I got my GED to when I took college, community classes, and on and on. All that to say that it was in my own way, in my own experience. None of it was easy. I don't sound like regional theater. I don't, you know, I don't sing, I don't dance. I sound like I'm from New York City, and I sound like mostly I'm from the Bronx. And so, yeah,
Boogie down.
exactly. So I committed, and I also fell in love with a writer named Stephen Adley Gerges. And that was around the time I started becoming an actor, when he had the Jesus Hop the A Train and Our Lady of 121st Street. And it was because it was so similar to what I had heard in my community, the way I spoke, you know, the way that the archetypes that I had seen in my neighborhood. And I just committed to, hey, I could do this work. I don't think I could do, you know, someone else's work is good, but I know this work I could do. And I made it all the way to Broadway. I went to Broadway twice, one with the play that was called Cost of Living that just went up a few years ago. I was understudy to David Zayas. And then I made it with Stephen Ali Gerges and Riverside and Crazy and stuff, so I made it to Broadway. So,
Directed by Austin Pendleton.
Oh, directed by Austin Pendleton, which was fantastic, right? So, you know, my journey was a little unorthodox. I'm open to answering any questions and sharing that, but most important is I always like to tell people is the love for hip hop that I had because I was from the Bronx and rap music was so prevalent and I grew up in the projects and all that, that it was just like, these guys are speaking the truth of my neighborhood, and then who are the writers now as I look into it, who are the writers that are speaking the truth of our time and stuff, so. I hope that that becomes a bridge for younger students, you know, and the ones that don't really know where their voice is to eventually find the similarities in that.
Yeah, it's happening as we are the change, right?
Word, absolutely.
Can you like recall like almost like an authentic moment of exposure that made you say like, oh, this is really it? Meaning like, I know for me, traveling abroad, finding work, like even just recently, just finding different playwrights, and I found one and she was able to sit with me and just talk moment to moment about her play. And I'm still feeling like marveled that I had like that moment of exposure as an adult. But are there still moments of exposure that you experience now?
Yeah, well, you know, seeing myself, you know, when you see yourself, it's. I think I just said this. Please forgive me if I'm repeating, but like, you know, when a blind person puts on glasses, or like, there was incredible impact. When I played Mimi in Rent, I knew that like nobody else looked like me out there, and you know, gay men really liked me. Right? I mean, and that was an honor. It was an honor to be seen, right? And I thought, you know, but that wasn't the venue for brown girls like me to see me, right? It wasn't talking to the brown girls like me, you know. In the Heights did, you know, but I saw Irene Cara in The Me Nobody Knows when I was in like the 4th grade or something, and that her face, her presence on the screen made all the difference. It was like, she looks like me. The power of the lack of that. You know, imagine, you know, I mean, I don't have to tell a lot of you like that you don't see yourself very often. And that is, and that, you know, when I was growing up, we never saw us, right? We never saw us. And so this changes, slow AF, slow AF.
But it's happening.
It is happening. And you know, we keep talking about diversity. Like diversity, the answer is diversity from what? It's not the word diversity, it's the from what that the focus is on. Like, from what? Like, really ask yourself, what is it from? Because I'm not talking about diversity. I am who I am. I'm not trending or the flavor of the day. I am me every day, all day. And so it's about, well, I don't know what it's about, but like our work is towards inclusion. Like unapologetic inclusion, right? And that'll bring things up. I mean, I do. My brother was in a wheelchair. He was shot, you know? And it's like, you know, sometimes you tell stories like, you know, the white family who finds the daughter dealing drugs. It's like, oh, you rip up this money. This is bad money. You know, like the Black and Latino families like, don't do that again, pero don't rip up that money. We need that money. Don't be an ass, you know? And yeah, you know, we're gonna do what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna be here to say like live your best life and express yourself. Like humanity is really what might not seem to be trending, but it really, you know, to encourage. And that's not so much parameters as freedom before. I was taught to not trust my instincts, and that's changed now. We're changing powerfully for the better. And if we're thinking about finance, money, underwriting, funding, it's counterintuitive to our art and our humanity.
Or just even finding ways to be exposed to stuff like that to support how art gets made and how stories are told. Like, the more that we have exposure to what's out there in terms of what foundations are being supported of our neighborhoods, not only just big ones, I'm saying local. You'd be surprised how many people locally wanna commit to your communities.
Mm-hmm.
That's exposure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's like that local exposure, there's state exposure, there's like worlds that, you know, you're doing your one play, yeah, it might be one, but someone somewhere far away is seeing that and it's like, I wanna do that too. And that like, and that germinates the fever to keep the art alive, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've had to remind myself that like back when I didn't have all the credit or all the history that I have now, it was like, I honestly felt like if I can touch one person up in here, one person, I've done my job. And what performing meant was making like love, you know, like befriended, like being safe, right? And I mean, it doesn't always work, you know what I mean? It doesn't always work. Women who tell their unapologetic stories are vilified more than men. Men are like, damn, he's flawed, but he's cute. And like, I would do that too. Women are like, you know, it's different. And so who are you encouraging like, who are you acting for? Who are you performing for?
Are there questions germinating, just even thinking about?
Not related, but I was just curious about your path, how, like, you know, you were hired for welding, things like that. Like, how did you went through the whole schooling effort, you know, to educate yourself? Like, how did you make ends meet to get to that point if you are having so much trouble? You know?
I worked in the summertime, and then I took the school seasons off and tried to, I mean, worked on the weekends, obviously, catering or a restaurant job, but during the school season, I focused on that class because the classes were sometimes class and then performance, rehearsal and then class. So yeah, the summertime, I was just like, I was the guy while everybody was going to the beach and everyone's hanging out, I was just working. I'd do construction job, I'll paint apartments if somebody needed an apartment painted, and I just made it ends meet that way. I owe $230,000 in student loans, so, you know, it wasn't for free. It wasn't for free, and I had to take out all these loans because I also had a drug charge. I had a possession of cocaine in large quantities. Any drug charge doesn't allow you, at that time at least, it didn't allow you to get any student assistance and stuff, student aid and stuff at the time. Yeah, because you had drug charges. Maybe another charge could get you the assistance, but drugs weren't a part of that and stuff. So I would show up to the browser's office and stuff and have like, you know, $1,500 in cash and be like, yeah, I'm here to pay for my semester and stuff. And then I made it work with some, you know, jobs on the side.
Hustling.
Mm-hmm. But that is part of like an artist's life, right? Like, if I'm looking around the room, there's a lot of hustlers in the room, right? I don't think anybody's just solely a teacher.
Right.
And I think that's, there's like a beauty in that too, because what your experiences and all the knowledge you're getting from outside bringing in, it is a way to connect and empathize with like, even your students that are like, they're a student, but they're gonna go and babysit after school. Or they're a student, but they're gonna sell their baked goods. And I think there's something to really be encouraged and also just like 6s and 7s with them in some regards on that. No worries.
Enjoying that. Like, what do we think we are anyway? Like, we're not all 1% or trust fund offspring. And we think that that is really the destination, like the end game, that we all end up having coffers of funds. Yeah, I mean, like, what is it that's being fed to us, right? And so I think that, you know, what I love about you is that you are so, like, front foot. Like, the way you talk about your history is so beautiful and clear and unapologetic and non-self-judgy as far as I see. It's like, yeah, that happened, and it's not like, why would you do that? Like, ooh, where did you grow up? It's like, those are the stories of real people that we sit next to on trains, that we walk next to. That's real. The people that I'm talking to that I represent, many of them can't afford to forget the ticket price, but the time. They can't afford the 2 hours and a half to come from where like that's like 4 hours, and the other stuff, like that's their precious time. So like who's the I don't want to say victim because but who's the perpetrator of this? It's not you, you know? It's not you.
I was just saying, just being from a different borough, so like just growing up in the Bronx, you don't come to Manhattan, and if you do, it's the Rockefeller or it's the Statue of Liberty. Maybe it's an outsider, a guest, a family member who came from out of state, and you're gonna show them around for that one day, but you avoid it at all costs.
That's right.
You know? And it's out of your price range. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah.
And that's one of the. I mean, just to respond to that. It's one of the reasons why these guys are here,
yes.
Right? And why we work with shows, whether it's off, small theaters, or Broadway, to say these are your theaters too.
Yeah.
You know, and you might not be able to afford it now, but the producers should be bankrolling you seeing it, right? So that kids can go into and not feel like a Broadway house is somehow the Rockefeller's mansion. I just want to also riff one quick thing. You guys were talking about the hustle. And the hustle is a positive thing.
Yeah.
The word hustle has sometimes a negative connotation, like hustling on the streets. Whether you're hustling on the streets or hustling in your classroom, right? You're not being precious about your work. It's work. And theater is work. I think it's really important what these guys are saying to invest your students to thinking about that, right? It's not fun and games theater. It can be, but at the end of the day, theater is a hustle, right? And it's always about that. Art's a hustle, and that's a good thing. And
I think once you find your purpose, you know what I mean? When you're young and you don't have a purpose, everything kind of just seems like, you know, it's too much and family's pointing you in this direction, that direction. But once you find it, you take ownership of it and you hustle for that. You say, hey, I want to be an athlete. I'm going to hustle for that. You know?
That's right. You apply it to whatever you want to be. You want to be an accountant, you want to be whatever.
Apply it to whatever you want to apply it to. And then it becomes more meaningful to you.
And even like, I don't know, I think there's like a very underlying silent debate going on, but I do believe in loyalty. And a lot of ways to like help theaters is almost like working with them in a sense of loyalty, not necessarily like sell them, but just like, hey, New York Theater Workshop does a lot for students. They're like really just saying, hey, the youth, we know you're the answer. And just even working with them for quite some time, they've provided so many different tickets for like young students, and even just being able to see a student of mine on that stage professionally was like mind-blowing. Or like St. Anne's, they opened their doors quite a bit to not only DOE, but just young people. They want the youth there. And I think that's hard when you're starting in the beginning, right? Because you're like, well, this is what I see like advertised. It's $100 ticket. That's being like very generous. The $600 ticket, I know I just spent that recently. For you, just to see a student, you know what I mean?
That's obscene. You know, like we never blame the actual oppressor. Like the oppressive system of Broadway, like Broadway, has made it so that Broadway has the least to offer in terms of intellectual, exciting, vibrant, new, imaginative, pertinent, truth-telling theater. It's the last place. And that is a reflection of our culture. And so theater, like to be an artist in a way, is to begin a counterculture. Because if you want, like, you should be a blogger or, you know, or a YouTuber. You know, if you want to be a commercial success as an artist. And I mean, these are not bad things to do, and maybe you can find some really, really dope shit to do. Like, yo, I got some real things to say. There are different ways to do it. It's not the medium. It's what we say. So I think thinking differently about how we put out our content is another thing that, you know what your 6-year-old's going like, yo, it should be, I mean, who knows? I mean, you know, things are there is no order. It's anarchy when you're an artist, I suppose. There are no answers. There's just like the impetus to speak truth and speak truth to power specifically sometimes, or just exhale and normalize your own exceptional experience, because the more specifically we do that, the more someone will hear it.
And could I add something too? I just want to bring it back to saying that language is so important. Language is so important to a kid from the Bronx. It's so important to kids in Queens and Brooklyn, right? You grow up in an environment where all you're speaking is your language. Then you're introduced to these educated teachers, and you don't communicate. You don't have the same language. And so there was a study that was done where a bunch of inmates were now taught some better words and dictionary words and stuff, and the behavior changed in the prison system because they got more expressive with their language. And that's what I try to tell everyone, that theater does that. When I didn't have the words and I was like motherfucker and bitch and fuck you and all this other crazy stuff, that's because I didn't have the words to be like, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Or he's antagonizing me. You know what I mean? Like, this is stressing me out. I didn't know those words before, so all I knew was attack, the problem that's conflicting me, you know, bothering me here. And so I always tell that, you know, with theater, you can sit with someone and show them the words that are relevant to them, that, like, you know, like a play like Stephen Allegorius's work, maybe, or Dominique Moruso's work, or a Lynn Nottage piece. You can find these words and you can say, look, there's similarities to where you grew up. This is DC, or this is Michigan, but, you know, or this is New York City. You can show that, but then also, let me introduce you this new word today. This is the new word of the day. And it might not mean shit at the moment or whatever, but you put that new word up on the day and then they hear it in a rap song, the next thing they're coming back and be like, that slaps. You know what I mean? The first thing they're gonna say is, that word slaps, miss. I didn't know that word last month, but now that word slaps. And then you're just like, and because now they just learned a new way of expressing themselves. And theater does that. I'm such a much more articulate human being in my relationships, in my home life, in my community, because of the writing. I'm constantly in a play, constantly reading a play, constantly reading, constantly getting a script, having to read it, having to interpret it. Over and over. I'm interpreting behavior and I'm interpreting words. I'm interpreting behavior and I'm interpreting words.
And also that they have the privilege of those words. Like, no one has any lock and key over words.
Especially when you act, right?
Yes,
You get to
especially
choose what you are doing with these words.
with those words. Like, no one has reign over a Socrates play.
Right,
or,
no
like,
power.
no one has it. It's
But
like,
I could say, it was all a dream.
right.
And everybody will say,
Really? used to read
Word Up magazine.
Hello, Brooklyn.
I mean, for those who know from Brooklyn, but you know,
Brooklyn people better
it's
know.
Brooklyn. But we all know because the language is there. He made those words mean something, and those words mean something to us on so many levels and stuff. But you know, I know
shorthand.
I know whole rap songs in my whole head. I got rap songs memorized from the 80s and the 90s. But I could hear them today and be like, you know, and sing the whole song. And that's what theater is. You embody these words. You take them on, they become a persona of you. Hopefully it's not a negative persona, and you learn how to, that's what the education is for. You learn to put it up and then put it away. But, you know, the words become a mantra and become your calling, become your vocabulary. So I give students sometimes work where if I'm like, I see him challenged verbally or see him challenged and he doesn't want to be seen because he's too tough or whatever, here's this piece that, you know, potentially could have you scream that out loud in anger and frustration, and then you'd be like, wow, I'm so tired of that. That was so much energy to do that. Yeah, that's what your anger is doing. Your anger is causing you tension and you're just sitting there the whole time and you're exhausted. That's why you don't want to learn. That's why you don't want to study. You know what I mean?
So, yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Yes.
So I work with elementary schoolers, and I always have a really hard time finding text that it speaks to them. So I guess I'm wondering if you have any general ideas, thoughts, musings, or resources to share.
I have a musing, which is that like lately I've been remembering when I was very little and I came to this country from Panama. There was a lady, a woman. She seemed ancient to me, and she would read me the 1001 Nights, Shahrazad's, like Aladdin, but I mean, and so my son was doing a paper on Alibaba and the 40 Thieves and like correlating it to carbon or some crazy shit. But anyway, I got to read the story again, and these stories are not only brilliant, funny, timeless, and they show character. You know, Qasim is not like his brother, Alibaba, and the wives, and greed, and generosity, and cunning, and how, you know, the slave girl gets her freedom, you know, how she's the smartest one in the room. All these kinds of things are in this story, and I just thought, so when you say that, to be frank, I mean, there's so many bazillions of interpretations of the story, and the original is dense. It's not like for elementary school students, but like you get to pick and choose what to highlight, what to call out, you know. That's one thing.
I like to take albums. Stevie Wonder's a great album. And if you listen to his album, the songs like Jupiter and I Just Called to Say Goodbye. I think that was.
I Love You.
I Love You. Sorry, I just called to say I Love You. Sorry.
Different song altogether.
I started thinking of Lionel Richie and stuff. Goodbye. But I take the albums, right, and I introduce them to the songs. With kids, I'd rather have them sing songs than sing text, right, because they don't understand the words at the moment fully. But to have them sing songs gives them an expression, and the expression gives them ownership of taking their space. And acting is all about taking your space and taking ownership. So if it's the one in the back who's not speaking and doesn't want to speak because at home they say, speak, shut up, speak, shut up. You know what I mean? Then at least the music frees them, and when they hear that song, you know, it reminds them of community. But anyway, Lionel, Stevie Wonder's albums, you know, some classical American albums that you might like, music, the song, you know, Green Day sometimes is fun. But take those songs and then give them a theme. The theme from that song, we try to find what is the theme of this song, what is the body of this song, and let them act that out. I put 4 of them over here, and they're the bees, and then this one over here is the honey hive, and then how do they come together? And I try to create community for them always, and then a chance to express themselves through the song and stuff, instead of having them perform text. I don't know if that's always a clear answer, and you have to have them to perform text or whatever all the time, but.
So, on just kind of connecting it, I did do that. I took the most famous album, I'm blanking out, of Stevie Wonder, but this is high school. They wrote an entire play based off
Intervisions?
Yeah.
Not Intervision. The other one.
The one with the circles.
Thank you.
Yeah, the key of life.
And
Yes,
they literally
exactly.
named
Right. Yes.
But
That's a great album.
and it was great because they were learning August Wilson. They all had to write like just a scene in the styling of August Wilson. One wrote a play, a short play. We beefed it out, and then we just added music. And it was actually pretty. I was like this. It was really dope. I was like this. Cement. I will also say you are probably more tapped into so many things you're inspired by than what you think. In other words, with my nephew, who is 10, and his friends, and I love drunk history. And my nephew and I like laugh about a lot of kooky things. And so he was like, oh my gosh, I want to do drunk history. I was like, no, you do not. Well, we can do milk history. And so I literally took that same convention and I said, all right, great. So we have milk. He's like, but I don't want to drink milk. I was like, so we're going to drink soda in something that says milk. And so it was
Why don't you drink some alcohol or something that says?
And I was like, but you're gonna get so souped up. Like the whole thing is that you're out of your own state, right? And they were like this, okay, cool. And I was like, I want you to be so hyped talking about you playing chess in freaking Bay Ridge and beating the chess champion. And so he did all that, recorded it, and his friends listened to it and they started to to dub over his voice and his story because he had to do the voices. When I tell you that thing was a riot, and like they start doing it as a convention. So every time they see me, they're like, "Are we doing milk history?" And I'm like this. Yes, we can. But it's like there are things that you are watching all the time and they watch things too. I rather just hear what is. That's generally how I've always worked. It's like, tell me what you're into, and then I can make it a thing.
Yeah, like young kids. Like if you say like grab a scene from Boondocks, and do it, I'm sure they'd be like yes, you know, or irreverent or like cool things, you know.
They're watching animation in a way that is so much more dramatic. Anime has come a long way. I can't even say that. But it's so dramatic and it's so heightened and they just don't know how to animate themselves. So when you give them like the tools to be like, well, you don't have the way to draw it, but you could do and like how that might move something, they're like in it, they bought it.
It's not behavior that's encouraged at home, right? The parents are like, don't do that, shut up, don't move, you know, like.
I'm the wrong parent.
Not here, not right now. I see it all the time. The kid sits down at the restaurant, the first thing he does is take the salt and the pepper, he's like, he starts creating a whole environment of people and drums.
Well, this is what.
And you have to nip it in the butt, but when you're in acting class, all that is gold. That's gold. You can just go with it.
Well, you know, to speak to that, it's like, you know, instead of having, you know, it's like, here's an iPad, here's a phone, don't do that. You like go into your hole, like your K-hole, you know what I mean? It's like, and that is changing our wiring as well, right?
And it's also fun to just give them challenges. Like I used to just say random words. I'm a random word person, so I would be like pineapple. And people will come up with the craziest thing around a pineapple. I'm like, rap about a pineapple. Dang, it's spicy. Like, oh my God, it's spiky. I want to go to Hawaii. Like, I had someone that would do that. And then I would say pineapple, and some people would be like this. And they would just do it. And I don't know. It's like, I think it's an exchange. And it's a conversation. And the more that you're showing that it's wide, the scope of it is wide, you'd be surprised where they would go. I like, especially with younger kids. They're great.
And how about physicality? Just so, you know, because we're also body, you know, like, you know, just in our thoughts about what bodies should look like and what bodies should and should not do. And like, you know, to just, you know, everybody get together, let's build a tree. let's all be one tree. You know, like respecting each other's space. Nobody's gonna like put their hand, you know, but like how do we collaborate and create one thing? No, you're not telling somebody else what to do. Like maybe you can.
You guys know about the book Games for the Non-Actors?
Yeah. No.
By with the Colombian guy, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gold. A lot of good stuff there.
Like physicality.
Yeah, physicality stuff.
I have a different question. So I work in a high school, and I have a lot of students that come from low-income backgrounds, like a mix, but I have some. And some of them will be really good at things in the arts, but not see it as a viable career, right? Because they're, you know, they're like, I want consistent money. And what I've often found, right, is what they're choosing as a viable career is actually not for them. For example, I had a student who loved to just like edit films on his phone. He was good at it. And then I was like, oh, so you're going to go for film? And he's like, no, I'm going for computer programming. And I was like, bro, you failed algebra 3 times. Like, it's a miracle you passed the Regents. That's not for you. Like, I'm telling you right now, that's not something for you because your math skills are not where they need to be. But the #1 concern is money insecurity, which I understand. I grew up middle class, so I didn't have to worry about it quite as much. But, like, what would you say in terms of students like that who it's like, this is really what you're good at?
Well, you can offer your advice, experience, you know, your strength, but, you know, kids be doing what they have to do. I mean, you know, and like, we get
Okay, sorry. I will say this, bring people in, network, connect them. The reason why they have the nerves around it is because they can't see the actual application of it. And if you find that person, it's like you know that's the need, that's what you're searching for. So you already know the film thing is that. How many editors could be around? Let them find the internship, support it, like to a goal point.
I remember my mother used to say to me, like, to your point.
Sorry.
Oh.
Thank you,
No,
everybody.
that's it?
go ahead. See you last thought, sure.
Okay, what was I gonna say?
Your mother.
Yeah, like if you could learn your algebra or like your X the way you know that song that you love and you sing over and over. Like I've said that to my kid. Like it's true. It's a good way to connect the two things. Like you can apply that fervor to something else that you're not so fervent about. But yeah, respect and pursue what you like. You know.
Thank you.
I'm going to say how great that you feel like you got to keep going. That's the point, right? Let these conversations continue on. We're now at the Borough Breakhouse. We want to honor the different boroughs. Can we give it up for Daphne, for Erick, and Naima?